The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Morrison Estate Winery's main vineyard, turning the grape leaves from green to gold. Lois Cooper stood at the edge of the west field, a glass of her 2018 Reserve Pinot Noir in hand, watching the last tourist group of the day filter out of the tasting room. From this vantage point, she could see all 150 acres of what she'd built, row after perfect row of vines climbing the gentle Sonoma Valley hills. She was 64 years old, and she'd just walked out of the county courthouse 3 hours ago. The trial was over. The verdict was in. Marcus Washington, the man she'd married 3 years ago, the man she'd shared her bed and her table with, the man who'd kissed her forehead every morning, would spend the next 15 years in prison. Lois brought the wine to her lips but didn't drink. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself remember. Not Marcus. Not yet. She needed to go further back, to understand how she'd gotten here, to understand how a woman who'd built an empire from dirt and determination had almost lost everything to a man with silver hair and practiced charm. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. 29-year-old Lois stood in the loan officer's office at First Federal Bank, her 2-year-old son Daniel balanced on her hip. The officer, a white man in his 50s with thinning hair and a tie that had been out of style for a decade, looked at her application like it was written in crayon. 5 acres of undeveloped land, he said slowly. For a vineyard. Yes, sir. You're a real estate agent. Yes, sir, but I know wine. I've been studying viticulture for 3 years. I have a business plan, ma'am. He set down her application. I'm going to be straight with you. A single black woman trying to start a winery in Sonoma Valley? He shook his head. That's not realistic. Maybe you should focus on your current career. Daniel squirmed in her arms, reaching for the nameplate on the desk. Lois shifted him to her other hip. With all due respect, she said quietly, I'm going to do this with or without your bank's help. I just thought I'd give you the opportunity to be part of something special. He'd laughed, actually laughed. She'd walked out with her head high and her pride intact, even though her hands were shaking. 2 weeks later, she'd maxed out 3 credit cards and bought those 5 acres in cash. That first year, she'd worked her real estate job 6 days a week and spent Sundays planting vines with Daniel strapped to her back in a baby carrier. Her neighbors thought she was crazy. Her mother had called from Oakland, voice heavy with concern. Baby, you're going to kill yourself working this hard. But Lois had a vision. More than that, she had something to prove. By 1992, her vines were starting to produce. That's when Robert Cooper walked onto her property. He was 36, dark-skinned with carpenter's hands and a gentle smile. He'd been hired to build a fence along her property line and had stayed to help her build her first small tasting room, a converted barn that barely held 6 people. You know what you're doing, he'd said one evening, watching her check the pH levels in her soil. I'm learning. No, he'd touched her shoulder. You know, I can tell. You've got vision. They'd married in 1994. Robert never tried to take over her business. He worked construction during the week and helped her on weekends, fixing equipment, building storage sheds, teaching young Daniel how to tie vines to posts properly. Hands can fix anything, son, Robert would say, his big fingers gentle with the delicate plants. You just gotta understand how things are connected. Daniel had looked at his father like he hung the moon. From 1995 to 2010, Morrison Estate grew steadily. 15 acres, then 30, then 50. By Daniel's 18th birthday, they had 75 acres of prime Sonoma terroir, a beautiful stone winery building, and wines that were getting written up in Wine Spectator. But success had required sacrifice. 16-hour days during harvest season. Years when Lois saw more of her vines than her son. Parent-teacher conferences she'd missed because a shipment was delayed. Daniel's high school graduation, where she'd arrived late, still in work clothes, smelling of fermented grapes. She remembered the conversation when Daniel was 17, sitting at the kitchen table with college acceptance letters spread in front of him. UC Davis accepted me, he'd said quietly, for viticulture. Lois's heart had soared, her son continuing the legacy. Daniel, that's wonderful. But I'm thinking about San Francisco Art Institute instead. The words had hung in the air between them. Art? Robert had set down his coffee cup carefully. Son, that's a nice hobby, but you gotta think about your future. Art can be a future, Dad. Lois had reached across the table. Baby, I'm not saying no to art, but viticulture, that's stable. That's real. You've grown up in this business. You understand it. Maybe that's the problem, Daniel had said. Maybe I want something that's mine. But in the end, he'd chosen UC Davis. Lois had told herself he'd come around, that he'd see the beauty in what they were building, that the winery would be his someday, and he'd be proud to take it. He'd graduated in 2012 with honors, and then he'd moved to San Francisco and become a sommelier at a high-end restaurant, not a winemaker. I want to appreciate wine, not make it, he'd told her. I want my own path. The words had hurt more than Lois wanted to admit. Then 2015 came, and everything changed. Robert had a heart attack while working in the vineyard. No warning. He was 59 years old, checking irrigation lines one minute and gone the next. Daniel had been the one to find him, home for a rare weekend visit. The funeral was huge. Robert had been loved, but afterward, Lois found herself alone in a farmhouse that felt too big and too empty. She'd thrown herself into work with even more intensity. By 2019, Morrison Estate had expanded to 150 acres. The property was worth somewhere between $8 and $10 million. She employed 12 full-time workers, produced 15,000 cases a year, and had a waiting list for her reserve vintages. She was successful. She was respected. She was completely, utterly alone. Daniel called on Sundays and visited 3, maybe 4 times a year. Their conversations were polite but strained, both of them dancing around old resentments. You doing okay, Mama? He'd ask. Fine, baby. Business is good. You should get out more. See people. I see people every day. We had 100 visitors last weekend. You know what I mean. But she didn't go out. She didn't date. She had her vines and her wine and her pride. And she told herself that was enough. Until March of 2020, when Marcus Washington walked into her life. The charity wine auction at the Fairmont in San Francisco was not Lois's usual scene. She attended because her wines were being auctioned and because her presence was expected. She wore a simple black dress, her natural hair twisted up elegantly, and she stood near the back of the room, ready to leave as soon as her lot sold. That's when he approached her. Lois Cooper? The man was tall, maybe 6'1", with silver hair and warm brown eyes. His suit was expensive but not flashy, navy blue, perfectly tailored. I'm Marcus Washington. I just won a case of your 2015 Reserve Pinot. Congratulations. Lois shook his hand. I hope you enjoy it. I'm sure I will. Though I have to admit, I bid on it partly as an excuse to meet you. His smile was self-deprecating. I've been reading about Morrison Estate for years. A woman building that kind of legacy in Sonoma, it's remarkable. Lois felt herself thaw slightly. Thank you. It's been a lot of work. I imagine it has. He gestured to the bar. Can I buy you a drink? I'd love to hear about it. She should have said no. She should have made an excuse and left. But something about his directness, his genuine interest, made her pause. One drink, she said. They talked for 2 hours. Marcus was 67, a retired financial advisor, recently widowed. His wife Gloria had died 2 years earlier from cancer. He spoke about her with gentle sadness, the kind that felt real. The first year was the hardest, he said, swirling his scotch. You wake up and forget for a moment, and then you remember all over again. Lois knew that feeling. My husband Robert passed 5 years ago. Heart attack. I'm sorry. Marcus's eyes held genuine sympathy. It changes you, doesn't it? Losing your partner. It does. They discovered they both loved jazz. Both preferred the mountains to the beach. Both woke up too early and went to bed too late. Marcus asked intelligent questions about winemaking, listened carefully to her answers, and never once talked over her. When the evening ended, he asked if he could visit her tasting room. "I'd like that," Lois heard herself say. He came the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. By the third visit, they were having dinner together. Marcus was attentive in a way Lois wasn't used to. He brought her first edition books about viticulture. He planned romantic drives through wine country. He listened when she talked about the challenges of being a black woman in an industry still dominated by white men. "You're remarkable," he said one evening, after she'd told him about the banker who'd laughed at her loan application. "You took that rejection and turned it into this." He gestured at the vineyard around them, bathed in golden sunset light. Lois felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. They'd been dating for 6 months when Daniel came home for a rare visit in September 2020. "So I'm finally going to meet this Marcus you've been talking about," Daniel said, unpacking groceries in the kitchen. "He's coming for dinner tonight." Lois tried to keep her voice casual. "I think you'll like him." Daniel gave her a look she couldn't quite read. "Mama, when's the last time you brought a man home?" "It's been a while." Understatement. Daniel started chopping vegetables for the salad. "Just be careful, okay?" "Careful of what?" "I don't know. You're worth a lot of money now. This place, the business, you've built something real. Some men might see opportunity there." Lois felt a flash of irritation. "Marcus has his own money, Daniel. He was a financial advisor for 40 years. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying, and I appreciate your concern, but I'm 60 years old, not 16. I can take care of myself." The dinner that night was tense. Marcus was charming as always, asking Daniel about his work in San Francisco, complimenting the food, telling entertaining stories. But Lois could see Daniel watching him, measuring him, looking for flaws. After Marcus left, Daniel said, "Something about him feels off, Mama." "What do you mean?" "I don't know. The way he asked about the property, the business, it felt like an assessment more than curiosity." "You're being paranoid." "Maybe," Daniel kissed her cheek. "Or maybe I just don't want to see you get hurt." But Lois was already in too deep to listen. By December 2020, she and Marcus were talking about the future. By February 2021, they were discussing marriage. And in June, Marcus asked her to meet his children. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening at the estate. Marcus's 3 adult children arrived together. Terrence, 42, in a banker's crisp shirt and expensive watch. Nadine, 39, dressed in designer labels with a realtor's assessing eye. And Jerome, 35, casual in tech industry fashion, but carrying an expensive leather bag. They were polite, gracious, complimentary about the wine and the property. But Nadine asked, "How many acres is this place exactly?" And Terrence wanted to know, "What kind of annual production are you running?" And Jerome suggested, "You know, most boutique wineries are moving toward direct-to-consumer platforms. I could help you build something really cutting-edge. Happy to consult. Family discount, of course." Lois kept her answers vague. "It's a family operation. Been in the Morrison name for over 30 years. She didn't say she was the sole owner. Some instinct, the same instinct that had helped her survive as a black woman in the wine business for 3 decades, told her to keep that information close. When Nadine pressed about estate planning and how the ownership is structured, Lois smiled and said, "My attorney handles all that. It's complicated. Family trusts, you know how it is." It was a lie, but it felt necessary. After they left, Marcus squeezed her hand. "They loved you." "Did they?" Lois poured herself another glass of wine. "Or did they love the property?" Marcus laughed. "Both, probably. Is that so bad? You've built something incredible here, Lois." Of course they're impressed. She wanted to believe him. Marcus proposed in August 2021 at sunset in the West Vineyard, the one with the view of the entire valley. The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Lois said yes with tears in her eyes, and for a moment she let herself believe that loneliness was finally over. But when she called her attorney Janet Richardson to discuss the wedding, Janet's first words were, "Please tell me you're getting a prenup." "Janet, Lois, I've known you for 20 years. You've built an $8 to $10 million estate from nothing. I've watched you fight for every acre. You need to protect yourself." Marcus isn't like that. Maybe not, but a prenup protects you both. If he loves you, he'll understand. When Lois brought it up, Marcus's face fell. "You don't trust me?" "It's not about trust. It's about being smart." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "If it makes you feel better, I'll sign it." The prenup was clear. All assets acquired before the marriage remained separate property. The estate, the winery, the business, all Lois's. But Lois still didn't tell Marcus the full truth. She let him and his children continue to believe that Morrison Estate was complicated family property with multiple stakeholders. She deflected questions about ownership structure. She kept her cards close. Later, she'd wonder if some part of her already knew. The wedding in October 2021 was small and beautiful. They married under an arch covered in grapevines, with 50 guests watching. Daniel stood beside Lois, giving her away, though she could see the worry in his eyes. Nadine hugged Lois after the ceremony and called her Mom. It should have been sweet. Instead, it felt like a performance. The first 8 months of marriage were good. Marcus settled into the farmhouse, played golf at the club in Santa Rosa, hosted Sunday dinners for his children. He didn't interfere with the business. He was just there. Companionship after so many years alone. Lois told herself Daniel had been wrong, that her instincts about keeping the ownership secret had been paranoid, that maybe, finally, she could let her guard down. But in the summer of 2022, things started to shift. It was small at first. Terrence visiting alone, asking to just take a quick look at the books. Nadine showing up with real estate appraisers for insurance purposes. Jerome pushing his tech consulting services a little too hard. And Marcus, gentle Marcus, asking her to sign documents. "Just updating the life insurance beneficiaries," he'd say, sliding papers across the kitchen table. But when Lois read them carefully, they weren't insurance forms. They were financial powers of attorney, property transfer authorizations, documents that would give him legal control. "Marcus, I'm not signing this." "Don't you trust me?" "It's not about trust. I just don't understand these documents." His warmth would evaporate. He'd go cold, silent, not speaking to her for days. And Lois would lie awake at night, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The morning Terrence showed up unannounced, Lois was in the winery building reviewing the harvest schedule with Carlos Mendoza, her vineyard manager of 20 years. Carlos was the only person besides Janet who knew the full truth about Morrison Estate's ownership, and he'd earned that trust through 2 decades of loyalty. "Lois!" Terrence's voice echoed through the barrel room. "Hope I'm not interrupting." She looked up from the clipboard. "Terrence, I wasn't expecting you." "I was in the area, thought I'd drop by." He smiled that smooth banker's smile. "Dad mentioned you might be thinking about expanding distribution. I have some connections in that world. Thought maybe I could take a look at your current setup, offer some advice." Lois exchanged a glance with Carlos, who quietly excused himself. "I never said anything to Marcus about expanding distribution," Lois said carefully. "Really? Must have misunderstood." Terrence walked along the rows of oak barrels, running his hand over the wood. "These are beautiful. French oak?" "Some. Others are American." "What's the value of inventory in here? Ballpark?" The question was too direct, too familiar. Lois set down her clipboard. "Terrence, what is this really about?" Nothing. He held up his hands. "Just trying to understand the business better. We're family now, right? And I could really help maximize your ROI. You could easily double your revenue with the right distribution strategy. We're happy with our current distributors. But are you maximizing profit? Because from what I can see, Terrence," Lois's voice went flat. "I've been running this business for 33 years. I think I know what I'm doing." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you do. I just thought, well, family helps family, right?" After he left, Carlos came back into the barrel room. "That man gives me a bad feeling," he said quietly. "Yeah," Lois said. "Me too." 2 weeks later, it was Nadine. Lois came home from a wine distributor meeting to find Nadine on the property with two men in polo shirts carrying clipboards and cameras. "Nadine, what's going on?" "Oh, Lois, perfect timing." Nadine's smile was bright, professional. "These are appraisers. I was telling Dad that with all the wildfires California's been having, you really need to make sure you're properly insured. Climate change is affecting property values, and I have excellent insurance. But when's the last time you had the land appraised? These gentlemen are the best in Sonoma County. They're just going to walk the property, take some measurements." "No, they're not." Lois kept her voice level. "Thank you for your concern, Nadine, but my insurance is handled. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The appraisers looked at Nadine, uncertain. "Lois, I'm just trying to help. Do you know what comparable properties in Sonoma are going for? 12, even 15 million. You should know what you're sitting on." "I know exactly what I'm sitting on." Lois turned to the appraisers. "Please leave my property." After they drove away, Nadine's professional mask slipped just slightly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "Making what harder?" "Nothing. Forget it." Nadine grabbed her purse. "I was just trying to protect Dad's investment." The words hung in the air after Nadine left. Dad's investment. As if Marcus had put anything into this place. As if Morrison Estate was something he'd built. That night, Lois called Daniel. "I think something's wrong," she said without preamble. "With what?" "Marcus's kids. They keep coming around, asking about the business, trying to get access to financial information. And Marcus," she hesitated, "he keeps asking me to sign things." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "What kind of things?" "Papers. Documents. He says they're for insurance or estate planning, but when I read them, they're financial powers of attorney, property authorizations." "Mom, you haven't signed anything, have you?" "No, but Daniel, he gets so cold when I refuse. Won't talk to me for days." "Good. Don't sign anything." Daniel's voice was tight. "I'm coming up this weekend." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. I'll be there Saturday." But before Saturday came, Jerome made his move. He showed up Thursday evening with a laptop and a presentation folder. "Uncle Jerome brought dinner," he announced, holding up bags from an expensive Italian restaurant. "Thought we could have a family meal, and I could show you this e-commerce platform I've been working on." Marcus beamed. "That's wonderful, son. Lois, isn't that thoughtful?" Over pasta and wine, Jerome set up his laptop and launched into a slick presentation. Graphics, charts, testimonials from other wineries. "The direct-to-consumer market is exploding," Jerome said, "but you need the right infrastructure. I can build you a custom platform, targeted marketing, analytics, the whole package." "How much?" Lois asked. "For family? 50,000. That's a steal, honestly. For anyone else, I'd charge twice that." Lois set down her wine glass. "Jerome, we already have a website. We already do direct sales. But imagine what you could do with proper data analytics. Imagine tracking customer behavior, optimizing conversion rates." "I'm not interested." The room went quiet. Marcus's smile faded. "Lois," he said softly, "Jerome's offering to help. At $50,000? It's an investment in the business, in our future. It's my business, Marcus, and I'm not interested." She saw it then, a flash of something cold in Marcus's eyes before he recovered. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Your business, your decision." But that night, as Lois lay in bed, she heard Marcus on the phone in his study. The door was closed, but voices carry in old farmhouses. "She's not going for it. I told you she's suspicious. We need to try another approach." Lois's blood ran cold. She crept to the study door, pressing her ear against the wood. "The documents didn't work either. She reads everything. No, she still hasn't told me about the ownership structure." I know. Just give me more time." When Marcus came to bed an hour later, Lois pretended to be asleep. He kissed her forehead gently, like he always did. She felt sick. Saturday morning, Daniel arrived while Marcus was at his golf club. Lois met him on the porch, and before she could say anything, he pulled her into a tight hug. "Tell me everything," he said. They sat at the kitchen table, and Lois laid it all out. The visits from Marcus's children, the documents, the overheard phone conversation. Daniel's jaw tightened with each detail. "Mom, we need to call Janet now. It's Saturday. I don't care. Call her." Janet Richardson answered on the third ring. When Lois explained the situation, Janet's voice went sharp and professional. "Lois, I need you to listen to me carefully. I want you to stay calm, but I'm going to run a property check on Morrison Estate. I need to make sure all the filings with the county are correct, that everything's still in your name." "Why wouldn't it be?" "Because if Marcus or his children have been trying to get you to sign transfer documents, they might have tried other methods. I'll call you back in 2 hours." Those 2 hours were the longest of Lois's life. She and Daniel sat on the porch, barely speaking, watching the vines sway in the breeze. When Janet called back, her voice was shaking. "Lois, someone's been filing documents with Sonoma County." "What kind of documents?" "Transfer deeds, partnership agreements, papers that would give Marcus and his children ownership stakes in Morrison Estate Winery." The world tilted. Lois gripped the porch railing. "How is that possible? I never signed anything like that." "I know you didn't. Lois, these are forgeries. The signatures look like yours at first glance, but when you compare them to your actual signature, they're obviously fake. Whoever did this wasn't even good at it." "Can they do that? Just file fake documents?" "They can file them. Whether they hold up in court is another matter. But Lois, this is serious. This is fraud. This is a crime." Daniel took the phone. "Janet, it's Daniel. What do we do now?" "We need to file a police report. We need to get an injunction to block these transfers. And Lois needs to confront Marcus." But Lois wasn't ready to confront Marcus. Not yet. Because she needed to know something first. After Janet hung up, Lois made another call. "Tommy?" "It's Lois Cooper." Thomas Reeves had been a private investigator for 30 years. Lois had worked with him back in her real estate days when she needed background checks on property deals. He was thorough, discreet, and he owed her a favor. "Lois, how's the wine business?" "Complicated. Tommy, I need you to look into someone for me. Marcus Washington. I need everything. Financial history, criminal record, work history. And Tommy, this is important. I need to know about his first wife, how she died, what happened to her estate." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "You think he's done this before?" "I don't know. That's what I need you to find out." "Give me 2 weeks." Those 2 weeks were torture. Lois went through the motions, working in the winery, having dinner with Marcus, sleeping beside him, all while knowing he'd tried to steal from her. She kept waiting for Daniel to confront Marcus himself, but her son showed remarkable restraint. "We need evidence," Daniel said. "We need to know what we're dealing with before we make a move." Marcus seemed to sense something had shifted. He was more attentive than ever, bringing Lois flowers, cooking her favorite meals, telling her he loved her. Each "I love you" felt like a knife. When Tommy called back 14 days later, his voice was grim. "Lois, we need to meet in person, not at your place, somewhere public." They met at a coffee shop in Santa Rosa. Tommy slid a thick manila folder across the table. "You were right to be suspicious." Lois opened the folder with shaking hands. The first section was about Gloria Washington, Marcus's first wife. According to the documents, Gloria had died in 2018 at age 62 from complications of a fall at their vacation home in Lake Tahoe. But 6 months before her death, she'd transferred her entire estate, a $4 million home in Pacific Heights, her investment accounts, everything, into Marcus's name. "She had early-stage dementia," Tommy said quietly. Her brother tried to contest the transfer. He claimed Marcus had taken advantage of her diminished mental capacity, that the signatures were forged or signed when she didn't understand what she was doing. What happened? Marcus had documents, power of attorney transfer papers, all signed by Gloria. The brother couldn't prove forgery. They settled out of court. The brother got $200,000. Marcus kept everything else. Lois felt cold. And the brother? Died in 2021. Heart attack. Can't testify now even if we wanted him to. She turned the page and her breath caught. There was another wife. Before Gloria. Helen Washington, Tommy said. Died in 2008. She was 54. How? Drowning in the bathtub at home. Ruled accidental. Tommy leaned forward. But Lois, 4 months before she died, she transferred all her property to Marcus, and Helen's daughter, a woman named Jasmine Brooks, tried to contest it. Same pattern. Documents, signatures, settlement. Oh my God. There's more. Tommy pulled out another document. I did some digging into Marcus's children. Terrence was sued by a former business partner 3 years ago for financial fraud. The case was settled out of court. Nadine lost her real estate license in Oregon back in 2015 over ethical violations, something about misleading clients about property values. And Jerome was fired from 2 different tech consulting firms, both times for reasons they wouldn't disclose, but I talked to someone who worked with him. Jerome was billing clients for services he never provided. Lois stared at the documents, her mind reeling. 2 dead wives. 2 estates transferred right before they died. Children with histories of financial misconduct. Loa, Tommy's voice was gentle. This is a family of grifters. They've done this before. They're doing it again with you. But why me? I'm not rich, like, you're worth $8 to $10 million. You're a widow. You're lonely. You're the perfect target. Tommy paused. And Lois, given the pattern with the other 2 wives, I think you need to consider the possibility that Marcus was planning to kill you. The words hung in the air. Not just steal from her, kill her. Lois thought about the bathtub at home, the stairs she walked up and down every day, the way Marcus had recently suggested they take a vacation to Lake Tahoe. What do I do? She whispered. You get out. You divorce him. You press charges for the forgery. You protect yourself. But as Lois sat there, looking at the evidence of Marcus's crimes spread across the coffee shop table, she felt something shift inside her. Not fear, anger. These people had thought they could just walk in and take what she'd spent 33 years building. They'd thought she was just another elderly woman to rob, another mark, another victim. They were wrong. No, Lois said firmly. I'm not just going to protect myself. I'm going to make sure they can never do this to anyone else again. She pulled out her phone and called Janet. I want to build a case, a real case, not just for divorce, for fraud, for attempted theft, for forgery. I want criminal charges against all of them. Janet was quiet for a moment. Lois, that's going to be ugly. That's going to be public. The winery's reputation... My winery's reputation is based on the quality of my wine and the integrity of my name. These people tried to steal from me. I want everyone to know it. Okay, Janet's voice was steel. Then let's do this right. Over the next month, they built their case methodically. Janet brought in a forensic accountant, Dr. Patricia Williams, who went through every financial record with a fine-tooth comb. They found more forged signatures, 12 in total. They recovered email chains from the county server between Terrence and Nadine. Once the transfers go through, we split it 3 ways. Dad's handling the old lady, we just need to be patient. The winery alone is worth $10, the land another $5. They found text messages from Marcus to his children. She's suspicious. Back off for now. Working on the life insurance. Almost have her convinced. And they found something else. Something that made Lois's blood run cold. Marcus had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on her 3 months after they married. She was the insured. He was the beneficiary. She'd never signed the application. Another forgery. He was going to kill me, Lois said aloud, sitting in Janet's office. He was really going to kill me. We think so, yes, Janet said quietly. And we think we have enough to prove it. They took everything to District Attorney Sharon Mitchell. Sharon was a black woman in her early 50s who'd built her career prosecuting white-collar crime. When she reviewed the evidence, her expression went dark. This is strong, Sharon said. We can charge fraud, forgery, conspiracy, elder abuse, and attempted murder. But Ms. Cooper, you need to understand. This is going to be a difficult trial. Marcus will hire expensive lawyers. This will be in the news. Are you prepared for that? Lois thought about the banker who'd laughed at her loan application 35 years ago. She thought about every obstacle she'd faced as a black woman in the wine industry. She thought about what she'd built and what she almost lost. I'm prepared, she said. Then we move forward. But first we need to arrest them. And I think you should be the one to make that happen. Sharon leaned forward. I have an idea. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sharon Mitchell laid it out in her office with Janet, Tommy, and Lois present. We'll set up a controlled confrontation, Sharon said. A family dinner. You invite Marcus and his children. We'll have officers positioned nearby. But before we arrest them, I want them to incriminate themselves further. How? Lois asked. By bringing in the other victims. By making Marcus think you're about to sign everything over to him. By giving him enough rope to hang himself. It was risky. It meant Lois would have to continue living with Marcus for another 3 weeks while they prepared. It meant pretending everything was normal while building the trap. Can you do it? Sharon asked. Lois thought about Helen Washington, drowned in a bathtub. She thought about Gloria Washington, her mind slipping away while Marcus positioned himself to inherit everything. She thought about all the women who might come after her if she didn't stop this now. I can do it, she said. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Lois's life. Every morning she woke up next to a man who was planning to murder her. Every evening she sat across the dinner table from him, making small talk while her skin crawled. Marcus seemed to sense victory was near. He became even more attentive, bringing her coffee in bed, massaging her shoulders after long days in the winery, whispering that he loved her before they fell asleep. Each gesture of affection felt like a violation. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Lois told Daniel one afternoon when Marcus was at the golf course. Her son had essentially moved back home, sleeping in his childhood bedroom, watching over her like a guardian. Just a little longer, Mom, Daniel said, gripping her hand. We're almost there. During those weeks, Tommy tracked down Jasmine Brooks in Portland and Michael Torres in San Francisco. Both agreed to testify. Both had been waiting years for someone to hold Marcus accountable. My mother was terrified of him at the end, Jasmine said over the phone, her voice breaking. She told me she didn't want to sign anything, but he kept bringing papers to the hospital. I was 26 years old. I didn't know what to do. Dr. Patricia Williams finished her forensic analysis and found even more evidence. Bank transfers that showed Marcus had been slowly draining Gloria's accounts in the months before her death. Similar patterns with Helen. And Janet filed all the paperwork with the DA's office, building an airtight case. Finally, the night arrived. Lois told Marcus she wanted to have a family dinner to celebrate their anniversary. 3 years since he'd proposed. That's wonderful, darling, Marcus said, his eyes lighting up. The kids will be so pleased. You know, I think Nadine's really come to love you. Lois managed to smile. I'd like that. Let's make it special. Saturday evening here at the estate. Marcus kissed her forehead. You're making me very happy. If only you knew, Lois thought. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of Sonoma evening that made people fall in love with wine country. Carlos had helped set up tables on the patio overlooking the West Vineyard. White linens, good china, candles that would be lit at sunset. Marcus's children arrived first, all dressed in their finest. Terrence in a tailored suit, Nadine in a designer dress, Jerome in expensive casual wear. They brought flowers and wine, all smiles. This is so lovely, Lois, Nadine said, kissing her cheek. What a beautiful way to celebrate. Lois accepted their hugs, their compliments, their performance of familial affection. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. Marcus arrived from his study looking distinguished in a navy blazer. He wrapped his arm around Lois's waist, and she forced herself not to flinch. Should we start serving? He asked. Let's wait a few more minutes, Lois said. I invited a few more people. Marcus frowned slightly. Who? You'll see. 10 minutes later, car doors started closing in the driveway. Marcus turned, confused, as the first of the unexpected guests walked around the side of the house. Janet Richardson, Lois's attorney. Then Tommy Reeves, the private investigator. Then Detective Marcus Johnson from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, followed by 2 more detectives. Marcus Sr.'s face went white. What is this? Wait, Lois said calmly. There are more. 2 more people appeared. A woman in her late 40s with Helen's eyes, and a man in his 50s carrying a briefcase. Marcus, Lois said quietly, I'd like you to meet Jasmine Brooks, your late wife Helen's daughter. And this is Michael Torres. He represents your late wife Gloria's family. The color drained from Terrence's face. Nadine's hand flew to her mouth. Jerome stood frozen, looking between his father and the strangers. I don't understand, Jerome stammered. Who are these people? Dad? Nadine's voice was high, frightened. What's happening? Marcus tried to recover, that smooth charm sliding back into place. Lois, darling, I don't know what you think. Sit down, Marcus. Something in her voice made him obey. Lois stood at the head of the table, Daniel beside her now, his hand on her shoulder. She looked at each of them. Marcus, his children, the detectives, the witnesses to Marcus's previous crimes. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? She asked. Did you honestly believe you could forge documents, file fake transfer papers, take out a life insurance policy in my name and I wouldn't notice? Terrence stood abruptly. This is insane. We're leaving. Sit down, Mr. Washington, Detective Johnson said firmly. Nobody's going anywhere. Lois continued, her voice steady and cold. I think you and your children are thieves. I think you've done this before. Twice. She turned to Marcus. Helen and Gloria transferred their estates to you right before they died. How convenient. Marcus's mask was cracking. Those were legitimate transfers. They wanted me to have... They had a traumatic brain injury and dementia, respectively. Lois cut him off. They couldn't consent. You manipulated them. Jasmine spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. He forged my mother's signature. I've been saying it for 16 years. Michael added. Gloria's brother knew something was wrong. He fought as hard as he could before he died. This is ridiculous, Terrence said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lois pulled out a folder. These are the forged documents you filed with the county. We've had them analyzed. The signatures are fake. We have your email chains discussing the fraud. She began reading. Once the transfers go through, we split it 3 ways. Dad's handling the old lady. We just need to be patient. Nadine made a strangled sound. Lois looked directly at her. Those are your words, Nadine. Yours and Terrence's. I didn't know, Nadine burst out, tears streaming down her face. I swear to God I didn't know about the other wives. Shut up, Nadine, Terrence hissed. No, I'm not going to prison for murder. Nadine turned to Detective Johnson. I didn't know about Helen and Gloria, I swear. Dad said this was just about getting what was fair. He said she was family now, we deserved a share of the estate. He made it sound like she was being selfish, keeping everything to herself. Jerome looked sick. Dad, what is she talking about? What other wives? The family was fracturing in real time. Marcus sat very still, his jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice. You vindictive bitch! Daniel stepped forward, but Lois held up her hand. She walked slowly around the table until she stood directly in front of Marcus. You told Nadine I loved you, she said quietly. Did you? Did you ever love me, Marcus? Or was it always just about this? She gestured to the vineyard around them. Marcus stared at her with pure hatred. You think you're so smart, keeping your little secret about the ownership, playing your games. You deserved what was coming to you. And what was coming to me, Marcus? A fall down the stairs, an accident in the bathtub like Helen, or maybe a drowning at Lake Tahoe, like you suggested last month. The admission hung in the air. Detective Johnson stepped forward. Marcus Washington, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft and elder abuse. Terrence Washington, Nadine Washington, you're under arrest as accessories to fraud and conspiracy. As they read the Miranda rights, Nadine was openly sobbing. I'll cooperate. Please, I'll tell you everything. I didn't know about the murders. Shut your mouth, Terrence shouted, but his voice cracked. Jerome backed away, hands up. I didn't know anything about this. I thought it was just family business stuff. I swear. The detective separated them, handcuffs clicking into place. Marcus never looked away from Lois, even as they led him to the patrol car. You'll regret this, he said. Lois stepped close, so close only he could hear her final words. The only thing I regret is wasting 3 years on you, but here's what you need to understand, Marcus. You asked why I never told you the truth about owning this place. She paused. 34 years ago, a bank manager told me, a black woman has no business making wine. I proved him wrong by being smarter, working harder, and trusting my instincts when something felt off. My instincts told me to protect myself from you, and they were right. Every vine, every bottle, every acre, I built it. I earned it. And you couldn't take it from me because I knew exactly what I had. She stepped back. Take him away. The courtroom was packed. Media had turned the case into a national story. Wine Country Widow Foyle's murder for inheritance plot. Lois hated the attention, but she understood its importance. Terrence pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery, accepting an 18-month sentence. Nadine, true to her word, cooperated fully with prosecutors, testifying against her father in exchange for probation and community service. Jerome's charges were dropped when investigators confirmed he'd genuinely been kept in the dark about the extent of the scheme. But Marcus went to trial. The prosecution presented the pattern with Helen and Gloria. Jasmine testified about her mother's fear in those final months, how Helen had whispered that Marcus wouldn't let her be alone, that papers kept appearing for her to sign. Michael presented his late brother-in-law's documentation showing Gloria's rapid cognitive decline coinciding with asset transfers. Dr. Patricia Williams walked the jury through the forged signatures, the fraudulent filings, the paper trail of theft. Daniel testified about his initial warnings to his mother, his relief that she'd protected herself by keeping the ownership secret. And Lois testified. She described the courtship, the marriage, the slow realization that something was wrong. She explained why she'd lied about the estate's ownership structure. I built Morrison Estate Winery as a black woman in an industry that didn't want me, she told the jury. I learned early that I had to be smarter, more careful, more protected than everyone else. When Marcus and his children started asking too many questions about the property, my instincts told me to keep that information close. Those same instincts that helped me survive 34 years in this business told me something was wrong. And those instincts saved my life. The defense tried to paint Lois as paranoid, as a woman who'd never trusted her husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, elder abuse. The DA had pushed for the deaths of Helen and Gloria to be investigated as homicides, but there wasn't quite enough evidence for murder charges. Still, the suspicious circumstances were noted in the record. At sentencing, the judge looked at Marcus with disgust. You targeted vulnerable women, manipulated them, and in at least 2 cases I believe you killed them. The only reason you're not facing murder charges is the passage of time and the difficulty of proving what we all know to be true. You will serve 15 years in state prison. Marcus was 67 years old. It was effectively a life sentence. As they led him out of the courtroom, he looked at Lois one final time. His expression wasn't hatred anymore. It was something colder. Calculation, even in defeat. It made her shiver. The prenup held perfectly. Marcus got nothing. His legal fees had bankrupted him. The little he'd had left went to court-ordered restitution for his victims. Lois was free. But freedom came with costs she hadn't anticipated. The media coverage had been intense. Some outlets painted her as a hero, the woman who outsmarted a serial predator. Others questioned why she'd married a man she didn't trust. If she had doubts, why didn't she just leave? One headline asked. Revenue at Morrison Estate dropped 15% that year. Some distributors worried about the scandal. A few corporate clients canceled events. Lois spent months rebuilding trust, doing interviews, explaining that protecting yourself doesn't mean you're paranoid. It means you're smart. The legal fees had cost her $400,000. Money she'd carefully saved over decades, spent in 8 months. And the emotional toll was harder to measure. Lois started therapy. She had nightmares about bathtubs and staircases. She jumped when men's voices sounded like Marcus's. But she was alive, and Morrison Estate was still hers. Daniel officially moved back to Sonoma in the fall, not because Lois asked him to, but because he wanted to. "I want to learn the business, Mom," he said one evening as they walked through the vineyard at sunset. "For real this time. You don't have to do this for me." "I'm not." Daniel stopped, turning to face her. "I watched you fight for what you built. I watched you be smart enough and strong enough to protect yourself when everyone told you to just trust. You showed me what it means to really build something, to defend it. I want to be part of that, not because it's expected, because it's ours." They'd started therapy together, too, working through years of misunderstanding, resentment, and distance. It wasn't easy. Some sessions ended in tears and angry words, but they kept showing up. "I was angry that you chose this place over me," Daniel admitted one afternoon. "I was wrong to make you feel second," Lois said. "But Daniel, this place, it's my identity. It's proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I built something that will outlast me. I get it now, and maybe it can be mine too, not instead of you, with you." Carlos was promoted to co-manager alongside Daniel. The three of them, Lois, Daniel, and Carlos, formed the leadership team. Slowly the business recovered. By the end of the year, revenue was back to previous levels. Morrison Estate released a new wine that year, a reserve blend called Resilience. Part of the proceeds went to organizations supporting elder abuse victims. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Lois almost didn't open it when she saw the return address: California State Prison, Solano. Marcus's prison. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Daniel was there, and he read over her shoulder. The letter was handwritten, Marcus's distinctive script filling 2 pages. "Lois, I'm writing this because I want you to know how close you came. You were supposed to be number 3. Helen was a test. Crude. Rushed. I learned from that. Gloria was better. The dementia gave me cover, made it easier. But you were going to be perfect. I had it all planned." December 2023. A tragic accident in the bathtub. You'd been drinking? I would make sure there was an empty wine bottle nearby. Your blood alcohol would be elevated. Grieving widower, devastated. Daniel would have been suspicious, but he couldn't prove anything, just like Helen's daughter and Gloria's brother couldn't prove anything. The life insurance policy would pay out $2 million. Combined with what I'd already maneuvered into joint accounts, I'd have walked away with close to $5 million. My children would have gotten their cut. We'd have moved on to the next mark. But you were smarter than Helen and Gloria. Harder. More suspicious. I actually respected you for it in a way. You're the one who got away. I'm telling you this for 2 reasons. First, so you know I did kill them. Helen and Gloria. Let that knowledge haunt you. Second, so you never trust anyone again. That's my final gift to you. The certainty that you can't let your guard down. Ever. You'll die alone, Lois. Maybe not by my hand, but alone nonetheless. Because you'll never be able to love anyone without wondering if they're like me. That's a different kind of prison, isn't it? Marcus Lois read it twice, then handed it to Daniel, who immediately called Detective Johnson. The letter triggered a new investigation. Based on Marcus's confession, homicide detectives reopened both Helen's and Gloria's cases. There likely wouldn't be enough physical evidence after so many years, but the confession itself added weight to what everyone had suspected. Lois gave her copy to the DA's office. Then she went out to her vineyard. She walked the rows as the sun set, touching the vines she'd planted 34 years ago. Some of them were from the original 5 acres, gnarled, mature, still producing beautiful fruit. Marcus wanted her to be haunted. He wanted her to be afraid to trust, to love, to open herself to anyone. But as Lois stood there, she realized something. She wasn't haunted. She was free. Yes, she'd been 6 months away from death. Yes, the man she'd loved had been planning to murder her. Yes, she would carry that knowledge forever. But she'd also trusted her instincts. She'd protected herself. She'd been smart enough to keep her secret, to listen to the voice that told her something was wrong. And she'd survived. Lois Cooper is 65 years old now. Morrison Estate Winery continues to thrive under the joint management of Lois, Daniel, and Carlos. Emily, Robert's sister's daughter, has started working in the tasting room on weekends, learning the family business. The story of what happened has become part of Morrison Estate's legacy. Tour groups hear about the woman who built a winery from nothing, who fought off a predator, who protected what was hers. Some people still say Lois was wrong to lie about the ownership, that if she didn't trust Marcus, she shouldn't have married him. But Lois knows the truth. You can want companionship and still protect yourself. You can love someone and still keep your armor on. You can open your heart without opening your bank account. And sometimes the very secret you're ashamed of is what saves your life. On a warm September evening, Lois pours herself a glass of Resilience Reserve and walks out to the West Vineyard with Daniel. They check the grapes together, testing for ripeness, planning the harvest. "You doing okay, Mom?" Daniel asks. Lois looks out at her vines, her winery, her life's work. She thinks about Marcus in prison, about the women he killed, about how close she came to being next. And she thinks about the banker who laughed at her, the industry that tried to keep her out, all the obstacles she'd faced and overcome. "Yeah, baby," she says. "I'm okay." She looks at her son, at her land, at everything she's built and defended. "I'm home. I'm safe. And this is still mine." She raises her glass to the setting sun. "All mine.